Tuesday's tips and tricks.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Tuesday's tips and tricks. Today we're going to show you how to winterize your pond plants. I'll let Nathaniel get to it.
So today we're going to talk about how to overwinter your water plants that are not necessarily hardy in our zone. There's a variety of different plants that fit into that category, and there's a lot of different ways to overwinter things. First though, I want to talk about what is worth your time to overwinter. There are certain plants in our gardens and our landscapes that we put in that are annuals that we may just love and adore, but they're either so cheap or so much of a hassle to keep alive indoors through the winter that it's just not worth the effort. It's better just to replace them. And that goes for pond plants too. The first one, and probably the biggest one that is not worth your time because of the hassle, is water hyacinths. For the most part, for most people, water hyacinths do not grow well indoors at all. I've said that online before, and I've had people comment and say, well, mine did, and that's great. There are exceptions always. It's not a hard and fast rule. But for the most part, they don't do well indoors. They need really intense light and a lot of heat, and most of us keep our houses in the upper 60s, low 70s, and they want like 80s and 90s to really thrive. So definitely mid 70s. So they're not usually worth it. So the best thing to do with these is right after a frost or right before a frost is coming, because they want one frost and they're done. Throw them away. Don't save them. They're not worth it. They're $4 a piece and they spread like mad during the heat of summer. Just replace them each year. It's better off. They're an awesome plant. They're great for the landscape. And by the way, I know I just threw that plant, but we have more than we know what to do with it. So it's fine. Another plant you could consider maybe letting be a throwaway would be water lettuce. If you have a really good aquarium with excellent lights for growing aquatic plants in your aquarium, these are commonly grown as aquarium plants floating on the surface. They do grow well indoors if you have that set up already. But for a $4 plant, I would not set up that system just to grow this $4 plant when you could buy a handful of them in spring and have millions of them by the end of the season. So again, it's probably not worth most of your time to do it.
And those lettuce, when you put them in an aquarium, will become tiny little guys.
Little guys, yep. And finally, the oxygenators would be another group of aquatic plants that, unless they're winter hardy and unless you already have an aquarium set up for them, I probably wouldn't mess with it. If you've got an aquarium and all you have to do is buy yourself a nice planted tank light, probably worth your time. If not, I wouldn't mess with it. I'd just replace them if they're annuals. There are some like Anacris, Vallisneria, hornwort that will survive the winter as long as the fish haven't devoured them. But things like the Kabuma and the Ludwigia, a lot of the colorful ones, the really unique ones, they're tropical and they won't survive the winter. But they're cheap. They're like $3 to $4 a piece, so you might as well just replace them every year. So that's kind of gives you an idea of what's not worth your time. Things that are worth your time are most of your marginals and bog plants are worth trying to save. We've got a hardy thalia here. That's probably worth your time to, or not a hardy, this is a tropical thalia. Usually these are sold as in a red stem form. All of my red stemmed ones sold, so all we've got is this green guy. But a nice big water plant, and he would be worth trying to save if you've got a good sunny window. If you don't, it needs plenty of sun. So if you don't have a west or south facing window, some of these, again, probably aren't worth the effort unless you're going to buy some grow lights. Bog lilies, cannas, taro, any kind of papyrus, which would include your umbrella palms and all that, they're all worth trying to save indoors. And there's a variety of ways to save them. But before we get to that, what do you need to do when you're getting ready to bring the plants in? The first thing is you'll notice on this thalia, he's covered in old leaves that need to be cleaned off because we haven't had time to do it. So before you bring this guy in, take your pruners, and if you're a really good gardener with good habits, you'll sanitize them, wipe them down with alcohol or something first, rubbing alcohol, and just go in and clip off all of the yellowing, damaged leaves and the brown leaves. Pretty simple. Go all the way back to the base of the leaf Don't cut it out here and leave a stem, because that stem's just going to go brown, brown, brown. So don't cut it here. You'll cut it all the way back to the main stalk of the plant, and then you're good to go. So just take everything off that's yellowing, damaged, maybe looks like it might possibly have an issue, and you may end up with a fairly naked plant by the end of that. But that's okay, because the truth is, when you bring a plant from outside to inside, whether it's a water plant, a house plant, a tropical hibiscus, doesn't really matter. Anytime you do that, it's been growing outdoor leaves all season long. Indoor leaves are thinner and require less light to grow. And so a lot of the outdoor leaves over the next coming weeks or couple months are going to deteriorate and fall off anyway. So it's okay to go ahead and take something like this. Well, it's just a little red there. Take it off. It's not going to really, it eventually is going to fall off anyway. And most water plants grow fast enough to where the leaves will replenish and you won't be without them for more than a couple weeks. Okay, so that's pretty well tidied up. Ready, cleanliness-wise, to come in, possibly. There's different ways to grow this, so we could clean it up even further. If we wanted to grow it as a house plant instead of an aquatic plant, we could take all this root mat off and set it in a deep saucer of water, and just keep it moist that way instead of having to deal with all these roots. But maybe you want to set it in a tub of water inside. We'll deal with that in a minute. The next thing you'll do to prepare your plants once you're bringing them inside is treat them for bugs, because they could very well have some sort of pest insect, aphids or whiteflies or mealybugs. And a lot of times with outdoor plants, they're growing so fast and they're so healthy that a small population of pest insects does them no harm and you won't even notice they're there. But once you move them inside and they go through the stress of that transition, sometimes, and there's no air circulation or lower air circulation, there's lower humidity, so there's higher stressors on the plant, you'll notice that insect populations start to increase, and if you have other plants indoors, it can spread to those. So you want to go ahead and spray them down with something a couple days before you're going to bring them in. We usually use Neem Oil. It's an organic, natural, kind of all-in-one insecticide, fungicide. It takes care of most problems. So I usually use this if I'm going to bring stuff in or treat anything. It works great. You're going to douse the plant to the point of dripping when you use neem oil. You don't want to just a light, you want to like soak it down with the neem oil so you have droplets of neem oil dripping off the leaves. And that will encourage a better coverage and increase your chances of eliminating the problem. You can follow up later after you bring them in with another spray if you notice any problems. But you want to do it outside before you bring them in, because this stuff is very strong smelling.
It stinks. I hate it. I hate it, absolutely hate it.
I'm kind of on the fence sometimes. Some days when I use it, I like the way it smells. Some days it's awful.
And I'm someone who likes like essential oils and like I like that herb smell, but this one is nasty. It is a major musk coming off of that.
It stinks, but it works really good. So spray them down with neem oil. If you don't want to use neem oil, you don't want to deal with the smell, you could do diatomaceous earth. My issue with this is it covers your plant in white powder, and that's not attractive. And then that could fall off on the floor and you're sweeping it up. So I do use this on houseplants, but for a very different purpose. I douse, this comes with a little cap you take off. This little squeeze bottle is really handy. I haven't broke the seal on this one, but basically it's a little puffer. You just squeeze it and it puffs that powder out.
Don't breathe when you do it.
Yeah, don't breathe it in. But you can do this outside too. You're just going to apply it to the surface of the pot, and that will keep anything that lives on the surface from being a problem, or the soil surface. So you'll puff it around here and get a good coverage, solid coverage of this white stuff on the base of the pot, and that'll take care of your fungus gnats and basically snails, anything that's going to live in the soil, on the soil that you could potentially bring into your house. It'll take care of that. That's what I use this for on my plants, is on the surface of the potting mix.
So both of these products we sell, and both of these products aren't technically chemicals. They're
totally natural,
organic
products. Yeah. Both are safe to even use on like food crops up to day of harvest. So they're very, very safe products. They're safe with kids and pets and things like that. Okay, so ways to grow the plants indoors. keep in mind that unless you have a greenhouse or that's heated, and when I say heated, I mean probably above 60 degrees the entire winter, or a sunroom that stays about that same temperature, or excellent grow lights, your goal isn't to get new growth on these plants in the wintertime. Your goal is, I'm going to keep it alive, it's going to survive, and then next year I'll put it out, and then it'll start to grow back and fill in. That's the goal when you bring in most of these plants. They're not house plants, they're not jungle forest floor plants that do well in low light indoors. So just keep that in mind. There's a few different ways to grow them indoors. One, and this is an easy way, I think it's kind of messy and it wouldn't be my preferred way, but you can totally do this, is to get like a whiskey barrel sized tub, or a few tubs if you're keeping a lot of plants over winter. Put them in a south or west facing window that gets lots of direct sun, and set them in the tub with their pots and water just like they were in the pond. You don't need to recirculate it, although you might want to put a little air pump from an aquarium in there so it doesn't get so stinky over the winter time, or change the water once in a while. But as far as the plants go, they don't care. So you can do it that way. That's a great way if you have a greenhouse, or if you have a garage that's climate controlled with grow lights, or if you have a sunroom. In your actual house though, I don't really like that method. I think it's probably verges on being very messy, possibly very smelly. You could be breeding bugs that came in with your pots in the soil that you couldn't get rid of, and now they're multiplying in that water. So it's not my favorite way to do it unless you have the right situation. Another great way, if you want to keep the foliage growing, is to grow them like a houseplant. And like I was saying, put them in they make different size and depths of saucers, drip trays to set under your plants. So you could set the potted plant, clean the root base up so it'll fit, set it in there, and just keep that full of water. Every time it looks like it's low or out of water, take a watering can and just fill that back up. And that'll keep them wet and growing, and be a lot less messy than having them in a big tub of water. Some plants you don't even need to do that. Some of them, like the cannas and taro, can just grow as a potted plant that you just water like the rest of your house plants. But the one caution I would have with that method is to make sure that you have this on hand, because wet soil indoors inevitably breeds fungus gnats. So if you want to control those, keep this on the surface of the soil to control the fungus gnats. And it works whether it's wet or dry. It basically is like teeny tiny micro razors that slice up tiny organisms. Yeah. It desiccates them, it makes their organs shut down and fail. It won't hurt if you get ingested somehow, it won't hurt you, but small organisms like worms and slugs and insect larvae and things like that, it slices them up and kills them. So do keep this on hand and keep it reapplied if you're going to grow it in a saucer of water, because damp soil indoors always grows fungus gnats, and that'll keep the fungus gnats away. The last method for growing your water plants indoors, and this isn't even growing, but storing them. A lot of them can be stored dormantly because they have a bulb or they have a rhizome, and that stores nutrients all season long while they're growing. And then you can cut off all the foliage, pull them out of the pots, clean them off, or make sure there's no soil on there, clean the roots off, and just store that bulb or rhizome over the winter in a cool but not cold, above freezing, dark place that stays dry. So things like cannas can be stored that way. Sometimes you may have to do some digging around to see if they developed a bulb, but taro should form a bulb eventually. It's not a real big bulb like an elephant ear, but it does form a small bulb. The log lilies form a bulb, and some of them you can look up online for more specifics. I won't go into all of them here, but some of them do need to be stored with some moisture, but just not in water. And then in a dark, cool place, and some want to be stored dry. So cannas I know want to be stored dry, they'll rot. If you have a tropical water lily, they want to be stored in a moist environment, but totally clean and in the dark. It doesn't want to be on the cooler side. Room temperature is fine. So you can look that up online.
Bananas are the same way, correct?
But bananas can be stored, if you bought a dwarf banana for your pond, you can cut off all the foliage and store it in a dark, cool place, and it should go dormant. And just let it go dry. You don't need to water it in that instance. If you water like a banana or a canna and you're trying to keep it dormant, either it's going to trigger growth that's unhealthy because there's not enough light for it, or it's going to rot the plant. So you can look up specifics on Google, online, ask on different Facebook groups, and most people, somebody will be able to answer your question, or come into the nursery and we can specifically answer your question for more specific plants. But that's kind of generally overall what's worth your time, what do you want to do to prepare the plants, and then how do you actually overwinter them in the house.
All right, folks, that's your Tuesday's tips and tricks. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
One last thing. This Saturday at 10 a.m., LaLana will be leading a seminar on how to winterize your pond, so you won't want to miss that. If you can't be here for it in person, you can definitely check us out online. We'll be doing a Facebook Live video, so tune in for that, and we hope to see you soon.